There's producer credits that are on the sound recording, which is separate from what we do. We are specifically the composition and the songwriter, and that's what we represent. The original works for songwriters that we represent at CSAC and their catalogs that we track, we license, and we track those songs. And licensing just means we have a licensing department that goes out and enters into licensing agreements with various festivals, restaurants, radio stations, TV stations, all of this, live music venues. And then from there, we are receiving data on these performances in various ways. And we take that performance data and we calculate it against the song registration splits, which we just talked about. So the songwriter splits and the publisher splits, and then a royalty is calculated and then paid out from that. So if you're talking about international, there are CMOs, collection management organizations across the world, outside of the United States in various territories. In Europe, for instance, we're talking about GEMA for Germany, SACEM for France, there's PRS for the UK, all these different ones. It's basically, in all these different countries, there's one CMO, which would be the equivalent of a PRO here, but they represent multiple rights for their songwriters there. But when CSAC and US songwriters, when their music is played in those territories, it's tracked based on how that CMO does it and their government, how they decide to do it, when they decide to pay. But they need to know where to send that money for the US songwriters that we represent. And that's when, going back to that IPI number in the global rights holder database that every PROs and CMOs reference, and that's how they know where to send the money. And they would send it back to your home society, and then we would distribute that as an international royalty coming from those other places. So we have reciprocal agreements with those societies. I'm just saying, hey, when you play our songwriters' music, if you could, please send that to us and we'll do the same for you. It's indirect. We wouldn't pay them directly. We would pay them indirectly through their home society. It can get a little complex, but at a high level, that's how those royalties typically get paid. But you have an administrator that's helping you collect all of those for various rights and neighboring rights. Neighboring rights, it's basically all of these other rights outside of the performance right that are being played in these other territories. There's other companies that do, like, for instance, what Sound Exchange does. Sound Exchange is a different type of performance right than what ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, GMR, All Tracks does. So it is for the digital sound recording, and that's not the composition. That is the actual recording of the music digitally being played. So there's other things in those various territories there's organizations that do the same thing that Sound Exchange does for the US too. So that's a neighboring right. And your administrator can help you collect in those various territories, probably a little bit better than you could personally. So it might be a good idea to find an administrator of your catalog for that reason. CSAC or CSAC Music Group, we have basically an arm of CSAC Music Group that does that called Music Services. But there's various ones that you can look into to see which one is the right fit for you. One of those you mentioned was Song Trust, but there's multiple other businesses that do that. So, and they help distribute music. You can sign up with them and you can sign up for different services within those businesses to help you maybe do distribution of your recorded music, or if it's on the composition side, helping you find that music being performed in those different territories. New and emerging territories that are building infrastructure to do those things, that some in the Middle East are really starting to grow, and also just Southeast Asia and Africa starting to establish the infrastructure to be able to track these performances and all of these neighboring rights because there's so much amazing music in those places that being consumed, and people should be paid for that.